Welcome to the Philantrepreneur Show, hosted by Dr. Victoria Boyd, designed to offer tips, strategies, and insights to empower nonprofits and entrepreneurs with sustainable win-win solutions. The Philantrepreneur Show is sponsored by the Philantrepreneur Foundation, building capacity through education and professional services.
Well, welcome everyone. This is Heidi Anderson, founder of Credit Cares and president of Electronic Commerce International, and my delightful co-host, Dr. Victoria Boyd, who is president of the Galaxy Group and publisher and editor of the Philantrepreneur Journal. We are thrilled to bring you the Philantrepreneur Show, which airs live every first and third Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. But remember, you can listen to and find our entire archive on blogtalkradio.com/Philantrepreneur. We have some really great shows from the last, over a year now. They're for you to gain a lot of valuable insight. We've just had some amazing interviews and just the knowledge you can get just from going back and listening to the amazing guests that we've had on has been will be very valuable. And I can't believe it's already November. I mean, I'm really excited because November in Phoenix is the best. It's our highest average in the 80s, and it's like the time to be in Phoenix. And it's also the month when the energy of the holiday season kicks in, which is always kind of fun. And and I'm busy planning the launch party for the Foundation to Foster Empowerment and working on quote unquote perfecting the website. The launch party has been rescheduled to December 11th, which I just gave me a little bit more breathing room and worked better for the venue. But it also happens to be the 15th anniversary of my marriage to my darling husband Jim. And it's interesting. Yeah, thank you. 15 years almost. Between marriage, family. You're surrounded by family, and then and looking forward to spending time with my family on Thanksgiving and then Christmas. And the one thing that just really sits on my mind right now is all of the young people in foster care and those who have aged out who don't have a family. I mean, they don't have anyone to love them or a place to call home. And it just breaks my heart every time I think about it. And so everything we do at the Foundation to Foster Empowerment will be about creating a sense of family for these young adults, as they age out, and and give them a loving environment for them where they can spread their wings and become productive, independent, inspired leaders in their communities, and hopefully create their own loving families going forward. That's my dream and my vision, and the need is so huge. I wish we could serve so many more and get it done sooner. I mean, I feel like it should have been done 10 years ago, but we got to start where we are. And if you're listening and you're in the Phoenix area, I would love to have you attend our launch party, which is on December 11th, to let us know how you can help and find out more about us. If you are interested, please send me an email at handerson@F as in Frank, 2, F as in Frank, E.org, so Foundation to Foster Empowerment, F2FE.org, and I will be happy to add you to our invitation list and answer any questions you might have. We are also seeking silent auction items for the event. And if you want to just find out more information about the foundation, please visit our website, which is www.f2fe.org. It is still a work in progress, but it's starting to tell the story.
But it's coming along great.
Yes, it's looking great. Victoria did a wonderful job getting it going, and now we're just taking it, and just giving it a nice little polishing. So, and on top of that, Victoria, what else have you been up to?
Oh my God! I mean, I seem to be so busy to be retired. Yeah, I might as well just stop saying that. But just recently, I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back. I was honored to be recognized and included in the 2014 edition of Nevada Distinguished Women. Not living here or not, really being from this community, but I guess now just the way the whole Las Vegas region is, if you've been here over 5 years, they consider you native born. But
yeah.
they had a great awards luncheon at the Jim Rogers Classic Car Museum. I had never been there. It's a very interesting place. Also, just busy with some of my corporate clients that are really taking what they want to do to the next steps to build their presence in the community. Both of them are developing new foundations, which I'm really excited about because I really believe in that, so that they can provide the support and or programming that will be a great service to the community. So I've been really working hard on that and excited about what they're going to launch and glad that I can be a part of it. And it's really emulating what the whole Philantrepreneur show and radio broadcast and the journal and what we've been talking about is really using the Philantrepreneur model of developing strategies that align the businesses and philanthropic goals into a unified system. It's so exciting to be able to assist in that development. It keeps me on my toes because I'm constantly doing research and looking for new strategies and, of course, working on the next edition of the Philantrepreneur Journal. If you didn't get your October copy, it came out. And great issue about it isn't business as usual, but we're excited that the January edition will be about leadership. And I have just did a great photo shoot with our cover story. He's a very interesting individual. I won't go into that now, but it's really exciting to meet all of these people. And if we have listeners that are experts in leadership or marketing for these future issues, I'm doing an article. It's really a compilation of thoughts and ideas called Voices from the Field, where we'll offer tips and insights from leaders in their field and add it to the conversation. So if you want to be included or you feel you have something of value to others, please contact me at vboyd@thephilantrepreneur.com. I'm excited to launch this whole concept of just really talking to and adding just small snippets from different people. But talking about leaders, okay, I was going off on a tangent there. Our guest today is the definition of just that. I've known her since first arriving here in Vegas and have seen her work in action. I've had the privilege of attending a couple of her seminars. I've heard her speak. I've been in the trenches, so they say, pretty much for years and watched what she does and really just think she's a great person. Just a few notables. She is just one of over 100 professionals worldwide to hold the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive designation. She's a prolific writer with over 16 books and massive amounts of articles to her credit. She has trained more than 27,000 professionals globally during her 30 years in the profession. A recipient of numerous awards, she currently is acquisitions editor for Charity Channel Press and Genius Press, I love that name, and continues to provide training and, ta-da, is a column writer for the Philantrepreneur Journal. I was so excited when she agreed and was willing to join and give her insight to what we're doing. So not waiting a minute longer, it is my extreme pleasure and honor to introduce our guest today, Linda Lysakowski. Tell us a little bit more about your background, your work, and how did you land here in the Southwest?
Well, that's a tall order there, Victoria. But I have to tell you, first of all, I really loved when I heard the title of Philantrepreneur. I was so excited about this whole concept because I really think there are many of us like myself who are consider themselves an entrepreneur but also a philanthropist, and so combining the two is just a natural ingredient for me. And I often describe myself as being a recovering banker because I spent 11 years in the banking profession before I discovered that actually people got paid to do fundraising, and I thought, well, my goodness, I've been doing this as a volunteer all my life, and I love doing this, and I didn't realize it was a real career. So I had my eyes opened back in the 1980s, I guess. I hate to think that it's that long ago.
Wow.
And I started my career actually working for the university that was my alma mater, and I just got involved with them as a volunteer and thought, oh my goodness, there's a whole department of people who raise money for the university. I'd love to be a part of that. And I sent my resume in, and 2 weeks later, I guess I was Assistant Vice President for Institutional Advancement, which is a big mouthful of words that really describe a fundraiser. And then I left there and went to work for a museum, which I also had a great deal of personal connection with. And finally, in 1993, I decided that I would really fulfill my lifelong dream of being an entrepreneur and starting my own consulting business. And I've always wanted to be a consultant, I think, because I like variety. I get bored very easily, and I loved being able to get out and work with all different kind of clients. And I've worked with such a range of clients that it's just impossible to even describe them all. But in 2003, we were chatting a little bit before the show, and it seems like we all came from a colder climate to the nice, warm Southwest. And the way I got here was my husband, who I've been married to for 55 years,
wow.
actually came to me one day, and he was getting ready to take early retirement, and he said, I think I'm going to move to Las Vegas. Are you coming along? And, of course, what was I going to say to that? I said, well, sure, I can work anywhere as long as I can find clients there. And talking about coming to the heat, we realized that we all moved here in the month of July, which sounds pretty crazy, but I made up my mind before moving here that I was going to purposely come here in July to see if I could tolerate the summer in Las Vegas, because I had been here for a number of trips, but always in March or December, and I didn't know whether I could do July. So I called my local AFP chapter and said, gee, I'm thinking about moving out there. I'd like to come and give a presentation to your group, and I won't charge you because it's kind of a field trip for me to see if I'm going to be able to stand Las Vegas in the summer, but I'll only come if I can come in July. And they said, you got it. Nobody wants to come here in July. So that's how I ended up in the Las Vegas area. Now I'm actually living in Boulder City, just outside Las Vegas, and love the Southwest and love everything that I do as a consultant. And more recently, I've been spending more of my time, as you mentioned, being a writer and an acquisition editor for both Charity Channel Press, which publishes the In the Trenches series of books written for nonprofit professionals who really are out there in the trenches. They're not academic books. They're This Is How It Really Works books. And then more recently, the For the Genius series of books published by the same publisher, but we realized that not everybody wanted to buy a book that made them sound like a dummy or an idiot, so we decided to come up with a very general topic books, anything from wine for the genius to baking bread for the genius to public speaking for the genius, all these different topics. And so I'm really
for
enjoying
dummies. That's awesome.
I'm really enjoying being an editor and author with this group because I love helping other people write their books and it's like birthing a baby. This is my way of being a midwife, I guess. So I'm really enjoying that.
So, Linda, it's so great to hear your voice and reconnect with you. It's been a few years since you and I met, and in that meantime, it sounds like you've been up to quite a bit, including you co-authored with Susan Schaefer the book Nonprofit Consulting Playbook: Winning Strategies from 25 Leaders in the Field. It sounds like a book I need. Who would find the book useful, and what is its main focus?
Well, it's interesting. I think anybody who consults, not only to nonprofits, but anybody who consults would find this book helpful to them. And the way the book came about, Susan and I were chatting actually at a GPA, Grant Professionals Association conference about, she was thinking about writing a book about consulting. And I said, well, I've talked to several other consultants who also were thinking about writing a book for consultants because there's not much out there about consulting, and particularly we found there wasn't much for nonprofit consultants. And so Susan and I said, instead of each of these authors trying to write a book on their own, why don't we bring together consultants who have had, and all of the consultants that we brought together have at least 10 years in business, not 10 years in the field, but 10 years being in business as an entrepreneur, as a consultant. So we found that 2 years is always, as you probably know, the turning point for anybody starting a new business. If you can survive the first 2 years, you have a pretty good chance of going on and surviving since then. But as we started to develop this book, even though it was written for nonprofit consultants, we found that many people were buying the book who were consulting to nonprofits as well as small businesses and sometimes even large businesses. And we found that many people going to go back and forth. They might consult originally to nonprofits, and then they go more into small business consulting. And sometimes people who are in the small business consulting field find that they really enjoy working with nonprofits. So we found that there are a lot of consultants who do both, work with nonprofit organizations and with small businesses, and those are primarily the kind of people that we think this book was really written for.
Absolutely. I mean, I found it fascinating because launching the Philantrepreneur, I'm working with both sides, corporations, and it was really valuable in just going through all of the different topics, and I did a pick and scan and jumped around the book a lot, and I'm glad that even in the foreword or in the beginning of the book, you said it's not meant to be something that you have to read, from front to back, but you can pick the topics, and I actually did that. And even though it's called the Nonprofit Consulting Playbook, I found so many tips included that could really pertain to consultants in any field, and you really just explain that. The contents are so valuable on so many levels, and it's should be just called the Consulting Playbook. I just don't want to throw that out for you, because it has universal appeal and provides a peek into the world of consultants, leaderships, working in the field, building a business for success. There's just so many cross topics that even if you're not a active consultant, if you're running a nonprofit, running a business, there's some tips in there that you really could use. So let's talk about some of these topics. So what are the biggest challenges consultants encounter?
Well, that's a big question because there are so many of them. But as we talk to the 25 authors who contributed to this book, we found there's a couple basic things, and I'm going to start with talking about the people who are really just thinking about being a consultant, because that's some of your biggest challenges, is deciding, is consulting really for you? And for some people, it's great. One of our authors in particular really came out very strongly in favor of making sure that you have many years of experience in the field in which you're going to consult, because sometimes I see ads, and I've seen these already, for major firms that want to hire a consultant, and they're looking for somebody that has 1 to 2 years experience. And I think, how can somebody with 1 to 2 years experience get out there and really consult into the field? You've got to have a strong background in whatever it is you're going to consult in. Another challenge for people entering the field is, do they work by themselves or do they go to work for a larger firm? And I'm a strong believer that there's no one answer for anyone, and we've repeated that number of times in the book. Everybody goes about this differently, and I think a lot of it depends on your personality. I found myself personally that consulting was for me because I do get bored easily, and I liked being able to work with a variety of different kind of organizations. I didn't want to only be in higher education or in the arts or in human services. I liked the variety, and some people do well in consulting because they do like that. But there are a lot of challenges that you have to think about. For example, travel. It used to be a lot of fun to travel. The older I get and the more things change in our world globally, the more challenging I believe that travel is getting for people. So one of the things you have to sit down with is analyze, Are you willing to travel all over the country or all over the world, or do you want to work locally in your own community and make an impact there? But one of probably the biggest challenge that we found that every single consultant I think we talked to, no matter if they were working for a big firm, if they were a single shop, if they were traveling, if they were local, if their practice was focused on one particular type of organizations, and there are consultants who only work with higher education or only work with arts groups. But I think the universal challenge that all consultants seem to face, whether they're working with nonprofits or businesses, is how do you find time to work with your clients, to run a business, and to market your services? Those three things are all important parts. And that's what makes us an entrepreneur, whether we can manage all of that. I found that a lot of people are great at what they do, and they might be the best person in the world at their business, but they can't be a consultant because they can't run a business, or they hate marketing. And that makes it very challenging.
And
it's interesting.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned marketing, because that was, a lot of the hurdles and actually some of the learning curve that I had to get and look at was the whole marketing component, and it became a big part of even now what I offer, because that is so important to the total package on many different levels in many different professions, corporate, nonprofit, or otherwise. So
right.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And when you're accustomed to working within an organization, maybe your organization has a marketing department, so you never have to worry about that. But when you're out there on your own, you're basically selling yourself. You're selling your services, yes, but people are going to want to work with a consultant that they feel comfortable with. And so you really have to learn a lot about it. For me, the biggest challenge is getting a handle on the social media aspect. There's so much to that, and if you're not in tune with all of the social media, the public speaking circuit, all of those ways that you market yourself, it can be quite challenging. And at the same time, you can't just say, well, I'm too busy now, I have enough clients, I don't have to worry about marketing, because one of these days those contracts are going to end, and you are going to have to worry about marketing, and then it's too late. So you have to do it all simultaneously. You have to be writing the checks and running the business and, making sure all the financial and legal matters are tended to, servicing your clients and doing the marketing all at the same time. And some people just find it hard to juggle all those balls, and they'd rather not deal with it. So for those people, maybe consulting is not the answer, or maybe it's consulting with a very large firm that has a separate marketing department and has someone else to handle all the business end of it. So those are some decisions that really need to be made by people thinking about going into this. And once you're in it, you really have to be able to balance it well.
Yeah, I met Linda almost 4 years ago when I just created the Credit Cares division of electronic commerce, and I thought, well, I'm going to find people who are out there in the nonprofit world who are can maybe help me get the word out. And I guess I must have Googled nonprofit consultants in Las Vegas. Somehow I found Linda, and we sat down and had coffee. I don't even know if she remembers this. It was almost 4 years ago, and I realized just I had a kind of a Pollyanna-ish, I think, view of working with nonprofits. I really thought it would be a lot easier, and that I would go in and they'd get what I was doing, and it really didn't quite work out that way. But I think there is a unique difference in working with nonprofits versus regular businesses. And Linda, what would you say? What do you think makes consulting to nonprofits unique?
Nonprofits are very unique, and I think what makes consulting to a nonprofit different, and this sometimes is very difficult for people who are coming from the for-profit world to understand, but in nonprofits, you're dealing with, oftentimes, in most cases, a board of directors. So you're not just walking into a business and talking to the business owner and the business owner says, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to hire you as a consultant. When you're working with a nonprofit, you might be dealing first with a director of development or an executive director, and then usually that person is going to say, well, we have to get this approved by our board because we can't, spend this much money without board approval. So many times you are trying to convince not one person of the value of your services, but you may be needing to convince 15 or 20 or 30 people who serve on the board that there's a value to your services. So I think that's one of the biggest differences. And nonprofits in general tend to be much slower at making decisions because of that process of getting board approval. So it's hard sometimes to realize that you can't just go in and give a proposal and have an answer the next day. It may take months for the board to make that decision. If you're a fundraising consultant, as I am, you also need to deal with things like registration in the multi-states if you're working in many different states. These days, about 42, I believe, of the 50 United States have registration requirements that fundraising consultants are required to register. So this can be an expense, and it can be a lot of paperwork. Working with nonprofits, of course, you're always going to deal with budget constraints. Not that businesses don't have budget constraints too, but in nonprofits I find that unfortunately there are still a lot of nonprofits out there that have what we call kind of in the business the tin cup mentality. And I've actually just talked to someone recently that said, well, we're a nonprofit, but that doesn't mean we have to operate in the red, does it? And I said, no, it certainly doesn't. But you do have that mentality of people say, oh, well, we can't have too much money because it'll make us lose our nonprofit status. And actually how much money you have doesn't really control your nonprofit status. It's what you're doing with that money, that nobody's getting, no one single individual or group of individuals is profiting by the business that is being done. But sometimes you still have boards who think, well, we don't want to have too much money or we don't want to spend too much money. And so I think a lot of times boards especially tend to feel that, oh gosh, we can't invest too much money in fundraising, either in staff or in consultants, because people will think we're spending too much money on that. And I think that's really an educational process that oftentimes consultants that are dealing with nonprofits need to help educate those board members and sometimes the senior staff members that it is okay, and people understand that you're going to hire a consultant, in particular when you're doing a major thing like a capital campaign. People are raising millions and millions of dollars, and oftentimes they do rely on an outside expertise to do that. So sometimes it's just convincing the board that it's an investment, and they have to look at return on investment, not so much, how much are we spending to do this, and boy, this consultant's too expensive. So they need to think about it more as an investment in their future, and that's a little bit challenging in the nonprofit circle sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I call
it impact
investing. Yep, impact investing. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then we will be back with more from Linda Lysakowski.
Hey, are you a small business owner like me who wants to make a charitable contribution and needs easy access to charitable giving sources that you can automate for your business for free? Then I invite you to visit www.credit-cares.com. They have charitable giving options using their innovative merchant platform that helps nonprofits raise money and helps merchants make contributions at no additional cost to them using the products and services of Electronic Commerce International. Our giving options are easy to set up for small business. So if you have a business entity, we can donate in your business name. Go to www.credit-cares.com and see how you can make a difference every day by doing what you already do. Go to www.credit-cares.com and fill out the form or call 855-782-2737 for more information on how your business can be a difference maker in your community.
Okay, this is Victoria. I'm back with the Philantrepreneur Showtime tip. Each show we try to give some little tidbit of information or insight. And many of our listeners may have thought about hiring a consultant, but unsure if they're going to get what they need. As Linda's book discusses in several situational viewpoints, it comes down to finding the right fit. Consultants have specializations. Map out your needs, and sometimes you don't know what they are, and find the consultant to best fit that need. You may use several during the process, tapping into their unique specializations. For example, my specialization is assisting corporations map out and establish their philanthropic entity, emphasizing a congruence of interest. Simply stated, I help establish corporate foundations. So do your research and find your best fit.
The Philantrepreneur is dedicated to your success. Visit thephilantrepreneur.com to find and explore a wide range of services and resources. Register and receive benefits such as training, early bird discounts, and the Philantrepreneur Journal, a nationally distributed bi-monthly digital publication serving everything Philantrepreneur, filled with tips, strategies, and resources to support your goals. Need more marketing exposure and have community impact? The Philantrepreneur is proud to offer Ads for a Cause, where 10% of your marketing purchase goes directly to charity. Contact us today to place your ad. Increase your reach in a professional digital publication or radio spot. It's a great marketing tool to send, post, or share in a variety of formats. Deadlines are on a rolling basis, so don't miss being included in the next publication. Visit thephilantrepreneur.com and click the Journal Marketing Ads tab today. Mention this show and get a 10% discount. www.thephilantrepreneur.com.
Welcome back as we continue our conversation with our guest today, Linda Lysakowski, and our discussion of her book, The Nonprofit Consulting Playbook. Our last question dealt with what makes consulting to nonprofits unique. And continuing in that line of thought, what would you say are the biggest challenges faced by nonprofits today?
Well, I think there are a number of challenges that nonprofits are facing today, maybe more than ever before. One of them is that there's so much more competition in the marketplace today. Currently, there are about 1.3 million charitable organizations in this country, and probably no matter whether you're in a major metropolitan area or a very small rural community, you're going to have competition from other nonprofits. And one of the biggest issues that people, I think, deal with is how to explain to the community what is unique about their organization. Because I find that many times the general public just sees this proliferation of nonprofit organizations and says, oh, aren't they all doing the same thing? And why are they all asking us to contribute when they ought to be working together? And sometimes just getting across the message about what's unique about your organization is very different. I remember when I actually first came to Las Vegas, one of my first clients here was Big Brothers Big Sisters. As I was out talking to different people in the community about the organization, I would hear from a lot of people, oh, yeah, I really like the Boys and Girls Club. They're great. And I said, well, that's nice to hear, but I'm not here to talk to you about Boys and Girls Club. I'm here to talk to you about Big Brothers Big Sisters. And in their minds, a lot of the people in the public thought the two organizations were the same thing and did similar work, and they actually do very different work. They're both great organizations, but they're doing very unique work. So sometimes it's a real challenge to get the public to see that what you're doing is different from what everybody else is doing in this community. And sometimes it's not different, and sometimes the organization has a challenge to face of asking, do they have a purpose to exist? Because sometimes maybe they are repetitive. Maybe they're doing the same kind of work that other people are doing, and it's something that a nonprofit needs to think about when they're first organizing. I've gotten calls from, I remember once getting a call from somebody who wanted to actually start 4 nonprofits, and I said, well, first of all, why on earth would anybody put themselves through all that aggravation to start 4? Why don't you start 1 nonprofit and have 4 different programs? And they didn't realize they could even do such a thing. But you do have to ask yourself, are you unique enough that you do justify your existence? And then how do you explain that to the general public? So I think that's a big challenge. We've talked about boards already, and this to me I find is probably one of the biggest challenges that nonprofits today face is, first of all, recruiting people to serve on their board, recruiting the right people to serve on their board, keeping those people committed, educating those board members as to what is the role of a board member. Because I find when I go out and work with nonprofit organizations, no matter what they call me for, whether it's a development plan or a strategic plan or a capital campaign, that what I end up doing a lot of times is working with their boards, because they really need some education in the board involvement and what's the difference between governance and management, things like that. What's the board's role in fundraising? So I find that boards are a major, major challenge for most nonprofits. Some of them are just, trying to find board members is a challenge for them, and trying to find board members that are really committed to their organization and not just building their resume. Or as one person told me once, of one group I worked with, they had a board member who was particularly challenging, and they said he was building his obituary to make himself look good. But I think they do face things like this, and even among the staff, the leadership succession among staff and board. Some organizations haven't given any thought to this. They've had a founder who starts an organization, and somehow that founder thinks he or she is going to live forever, and so does everybody else. So, you have to realize that you've got to start training leaders, and this is a huge problem in the nonprofit community today, because so many executive directors are at retirement or very close to retirement age, and they haven't done anything to build up leadership within their organization. And then I guess there's one last challenge that I think we all face, whether we're a nonprofit or a small business, is just keeping up with technology. I think that is just huge. And again, that's an area where sometimes nonprofits think, well, we don't need to spend the money and we don't need to invest in technology, because after all, we're a nonprofit, aren't we? But you really need to be in tune with all of these things. So I think it's really important that we look at all the challenges that nonprofits are facing and then try to figure out how we're going to resolve all those problems and how we're going to face those challenges, because the organizations who don't face them just simply aren't going to be around. And there's one last challenge that I think most people don't think of as a challenge, but to me, I see it every day in the nonprofit sector, and that is the ethical dilemmas that we face as a nonprofit. And every business, of course, faces ethical dilemmas at times, but nonprofits, I believe, are in kind of a unique position, because there's so much concern about the donor and their interest, and a nonprofit is really like a public trust. You are accepting people's money on behalf of helping other people or animals or the environment or whatever it is that you're helping. And there are some ethical stipulations that come along with that. So just keeping up with all the ethics of fundraising and running a nonprofit is a challenge today as well.
I mean, you've touched on so many different elements that those of us in the trenches, the consultants that work with them, run across on a daily basis. You talked about creating the sustainability, what I call, the founder syndrome, where I've even seen where they wrote in their bylaws that they could not be put off the board, or that they would remain, I lost my breath when I read it and said, oh my God, so you only plan to have this going for X number of years, Yeah, right. And it's interesting, those that us that go in and try to support the nonprofits, we come across so many different things. So if we are a consultant, how can we help these nonprofits?
Well, I think one of the biggest ways that consultants can help nonprofits, first of all, is the consultants need to be aware of all the ethical dilemmas and situations. Now, I work mostly with fundraising, so I'm very active in the Association of Fundraising Professionals, who has a code of ethics for professional fundraisers. And I'm amazed sometimes when people don't realize that. And as a consultant, I'll go in and people will say, oh, well, we'll pay you a percentage of the money that's raised, and that's unethical according to all the guidelines and standards and codes of ethics. And people sometimes really need some education in that regard. So I think one of the biggest things consultants can do to help nonprofits is educate them on things like legal issues. Now, even though you're not an attorney, you can point them into the direction of, you need to be aware of these legal issues. You need to have a lawyer and an accountant that understand nonprofit issues, because the IRS has regulations. The states have regulations. Sometimes local municipalities have regulations that nonprofits need to be aware of. So one of the biggest things that consultants can do is to help them connect with the kind of resources that will help them understand some of these legal and ethical and accounting dilemmas. So I think that's a big thing. But to me, one of the biggest things that a consultant can do is to bring the objectivity. It's very difficult for people, as you mentioned, the founder syndrome, and I think this happens so often in nonprofits where, a person or a group of people has founded an organization, they've grown up with the organization, and it's hard for them to step outside and look at the organization objectively. So I think a lot of times what a consultant can do is say, here, let's take an evaluation of your strengths and weaknesses. Let's look at what you're doing well and maybe what you're not doing quite as well that you could be doing better. Let's look at national standards. Do you meet what national averages come up to, and those kind of things. So the consultant, a lot of times, I think their biggest strength is that they do bring that objectivity, and they bring a number of years, depending on the consultant, of different type of expertise. If I go in and I say, well, I've worked with 12 other organizations very similar to yours, and here's what they found works, it brings a level that is very hard to find within the organization. So a lot of times what the consultant does is just help them look at their strengths and weaknesses and maybe help them, guide them through how they could improve in different areas. So the consultant brings, certain skills in problem solving in whatever areas, whether it's board development or governance or fundraising or management.
Really
whatever
quickly,
technology.
Linda, I hate to interrupt, but because you were just had such a huge wealth of information, we should have made this at least an hour-long show. However, we are pushing up against the end of the show, and I want to get the word out. What? Did you make it an hour show?
I did. I made it an hour show.
You didn't tell me. Oh, well, now you tell me. I'm going panicking. I'm looking at the time and going, oh, my gosh, she's going to get cut off before she can tell everybody how to find her.
I was going to say, I thought we were
I knew she had so much information. I made it for an hour.
Well, you might clue in your co-host, Okay,
hey, we're live.
So sorry I interrupted you.
That's okay.
Yes. Why don't we go to the next question? Just why are nonprofits reluctant to hire a consultant or to hire the right one for their needs?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about that tin cup mentality. Sometimes boards think they're being prudent stewards of the donor's money by not spending very much. And I'm really convinced that the question that boards need to ask a lot of times is not so much, are we spending too much money on things like consultants? And it's not just consultants, it's staffing. They think they have to run the organization with minimal amount of staffing. And maybe they need to really think about turning that question around and say, are we spending enough money? And as I said, look at the return on investment. If you think about spending enough money on staffing, what I find in the fundraising area especially is organizations will hire one person to do fundraising and expect that person to do everything, run the database, write the grants, run the special events, go out and talk to major donors, produce a newsletter, fix up the website. They just expect so much from one person, and a lot of times that one staff person just can't do it. They need support staff. They do need consultants. And sometimes boards and even the leadership of an organization is unwilling to spend that money. So they really need to do what needs to be done, and they need to spend that money. And I think another reason is that sometimes boards don't understand what it is they really need. I think one of you mentioned that earlier, that sometimes the organizations don't even understand what they need. So sometimes it would pay them just to bring in a consultant, and most consultants will come in and do at least an initial assessment with you at no charge to find out what it is you need, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen RFPs, requests for proposal, that make it very obvious to me that this organization doesn't have a clue what it really needs to do. And I know that I've been engaged by people. Just a classic example of this was I had a homeless shelter one time that called me and said they really wanted me to help them raise money in the corporate community because they knew that was something I was really good at doing, and have written a book about that topic as well. And when I went in to meet with them, I said, I'd love to help you, but you're really not ready for this yet. You first need to do some creating awareness. So they turned the whole program around, and what they hired me to do was help them with a series of cultivation events to create awareness in the business community before they went out and talked to businesses about giving them money. So sometimes the organizations just don't really understand what it is they need. So lots of times it would be helpful if they just brought in somebody, and not all consultants will come in free of charge. I have to, let them know that. Maybe they'll charge you a small fee just to come in and do that first assessment, but you really should have a consultant come in and look at the real issues within your organization. And maybe you think you need to raise money, but what you really need to do is build a more effective board of directors before you can effectively go out and raise money. So I think that's one of the reasons that boards are so reluctant. They don't know what they need, or they're just unwilling to spend the money on it.
Well, I know, like in my case, is just creating the Foundation to Foster Empowerment, brand new 501c3, and while I have a great board and Victoria's on it, it's kind of just me, and I finally it's a big vision. It involves real estate and homes for kids aging, the foster care program. I mean, there's just so much to it. And dealing with government entities and things that I don't have any experience with, and so I actually finally found a mentor who has experience in all of that. But in the beginning, until the nonprofit is in funding, it's coming out of my pocket. So that's another thing is in the beginning, if you're the founder and you have to realize that until the nonprofit starts making money, you're not going to make money at all unless you can hire somebody to mentor you. So it was a big leap, and it's not inexpensive at all. But I don't really feel like I can do what I need to do and what I desire to do with the foundation without that kind of mentorship. And so it will be interesting, but I'm really excited about it, and I strongly advise anybody who's listening who's in that boat to give hiring a consultant a big thought. And so back to Linda, your book is a compilation of 25 leaders and consultants. So what is your personal viewpoint on the topic? I feel like we've heard quite a bit, but maybe there's a...
I think it's important to understand that, I'll be happy to share my personal viewpoint on consulting, but I do want to stress again that the keys to success are going to be different for every consultant. Things like working at home or working in an office, that's a decision that some people, when I first started my business, I said, I can't possibly work at home. I need to have an office. And I went out on day one, rented an office, hired a person with one very small contract under my belt, and I thought, this is crazy. It's not the way a normal person would think about starting a business. But I realized that I, first of all, was not a good person technologically, so I needed somebody that was, and I hired that person right away. And I just felt I couldn't work at home. Over the years, my life has changed. I've become more technologically savvy, and at one point in time, I had as many as 7 employees in my business, and I realized that one of the reasons I went into consulting was so I didn't have to deal with personnel issues that I had to deal with on a staff position. So now I'm back to working by myself, out of my home, and it's a totally different environment. But it's going to be different for each person. Some people would never be able to be successful working at home by themselves because they need support. They need that team, and they need the back and forth that happens in an office environment. So you have to, first of all, understand your own personality. Are you a good independent worker? Can you work at home and resist the temptation to, that closet really needs cleaning today, so I'm going to do that today. Those are the kind of things that every consultant has to make up their mind what's different for them. And do you like the marketing, and can you manage the marketing and the financial and the legal aspects? Now, I happen to like the marketing of the business. In fact, I probably like it too much. Sometimes I'd love to just go out there and market myself, but then I realize, oh my gosh, I have to service all these clients if I get too many of them. So I've had to really control my marketing and make sure that I am not selling myself to so many clients that I can't handle them all. I found out early on that even though I spent 11 years in banking and could handle the accounting parts of running a business, I hated doing it. So I did hire someone, and I do have somebody that does that for me remotely, but as a part-time person. So I think you have to just look at yourself and say, what's right for me? And if you don't like working alone, then you probably don't want to work at home by yourself because you'll go crazy. Maybe you need to work for a bigger firm, or maybe you need to become a bigger firm yourself so you have a team working with you. So I think a lot of it just depends on what's right for your personality. And if you feel that you can't handle all this, then maybe being a consultant is not a good thing for you. But there are some national nonprofit organizations that actually have people who are employees of the organization, but they serve like a consultant because they're out working with chapters all over the country. So that's kind of an ideal world for somebody who likes consulting but can't handle doing the marketing and the financial and the running the business and everything else. So look at what works for you, and I think that's probably the best advice I could give anyone.
That's great. As a consultant myself, many of the areas covered in the book really resonate with me. We're going to get to these takeaways. What would be some takeaways? And we're getting down to about 6 minutes left here. What would you emphasize to our listeners today?
Well, I think the first thing I would emphasize is that not everyone is cut out to be a consultant. I know I've said that in numerous different ways. But really, look at some of there's a bazillion different personality tests out there that you can do, Myers-Briggs and DISC and Enneagram and all those things. Look at your own personality and decide if you really can do this. And I think one of the most important things to me is that consulting is not just something that you do between jobs. There really needs to be a commitment to the profession. And lots of times, I'll hear somebody that they're working for XYZ organization, and then, a couple months later they're a consultant, and then they're working for another organization, and then they're a consultant again, and they're doing it between jobs. And that shows that they don't really have a commitment to the profession. Because what if you decide you're a consultant and you sign up clients, and then all of a sudden you decide to go back and work for another nonprofit? What happens to those clients? So you really need to make that commitment to the profession and to your clients. And I think the other takeaway that I would like to do is really a play on this show's name, the Philantrepreneur, because as a consultant, you do need to be a philanthropist. In fact, I wrote several articles in the book myself, and one of them was, are you a philanthropist? And now I wish I would have said, are you a philantrepreneur? Because maybe in the second edition of the book we can change it. But I do think it's important, if you're going to work with nonprofits, that you are a philanthropist. And consultants have done this various ways. Some just give back to the profession by writing, by teaching, by going out and speaking. Others have a very formal program where they give a certain amount of their income away to philanthropic causes, or they might choose to do some pro bono work. Maybe once a year they'll tackle a pro bono client. But I do think being a philanthropist or a philantrepreneur is really important for anybody that works with nonprofits.
Well, Linda, as I started to say a little too earlier, you are a wealth of information. So please let our listeners know how to find you, the charity channels and the Genius Press, or all the projects you conduct. Where can they get that information or ask questions?
Okay, well, the easiest way is probably going to my website, which is pretty easy. It's lindalysakowski.com. Of course, spelling Lysakowski, well, actually spelling Linda might be a challenge too, because I get a lot of people want to spell my name with a Y, so it's Linda, and the last name is Lysakowski. So lindalysakowski.com is my website, and on there are links to the charitychannel.com and forthegenius.com websites. And my email is pretty easy. It's linda@lindalysakowski.com. And you can also contact me. My website has Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and my email address on there. And I would like to make a special offer, actually, to your listeners, that if you're listening live and you purchase the Nonprofit Consulting Playbook by November 8th, which happens to be my birthday, so I'm going to give this as a birthday special, you can get a 15% discount on the book. If you use the code Linda, this is all small letters, LINDA, 2014 books. So if you go to the Charity Channel Press website and put in that discount code, and if you have any trouble remembering that, just email me and I'll make sure that you get that code. So I'd be happy to offer that discount today.
Well, thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you giving a special offer. It's been a pleasure and delight to have you on the show today. Are you a philantrepreneur? Have you merged a business with your purpose? Then we would like to share your story as a guest on the show. Visit thephilantrepreneur.com and send us a note or submit the guest inquiry form. Here we go again.
Well, Victoria, it's been another great show. For the next few shows, we will be featuring more authors that have written books that cross over appeal from the Charity Channel. On Wednesday, November 19th, it's Sarah Sutton, author of A Green Nonprofit, once again at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. So this is Victoria Boyd and Heidi Anderson saying thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you back on the show on November 19th.
Thank you for tuning in to the Philantrepreneur Radio Show, hosted by Dr. Victoria Boyd. Get involved. Follow us on Facebook and other social media outlets. If you wish to share comments or suggestions or appear as a guest on our show, visit www.thephilantrepreneur.com. Contact Victoria Boyd. Email her at theboyd@thephilantrepreneur.com. The Philantrepreneur Radio Show is a production of and sponsored by the Philantrepreneur Foundation, a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.